Hi, hello, welcome to my channel. My name is Wendy, also known as the Geek Goddess. Hi, hello, it is me, Zai. Hi. Today, we are going to be reading the first chapter of a lot of the books that I own on my physical TBR. Have you ever just piled up a whole bunch of books? You just bought a whole bunch of books and you hoarded them in your house, and then you don't know how you ended up with so many books, and you're like, how did this happen? Are you a book dragon? That's what they call book hoarders. Book dragon. Are you a book dragon? I'm a book dragon. I have over 130 books that I haven't read on my shelf. My shelves are so heavy that literally one broke. I don't even know when, okay? Because I haven't been in there in a few days, but it happened over the course of a few days. They're all books I haven't read. And so today, I'm going to be reading the first chapter of some of the books, not all of them, because I tried doing all of them and it was just a overkill for me. It literally burned me out. So I'm going to show you some of the books on my physical TBR, and I might do a part 2, part 3, and eventually get to through all of them. And then from there, I'm going to rate the first chapter from 1 to 10, so I can see which ones should be a priority and which ones are okay being in the back burner. This is not my idea. So Books and Lala was the first one that made this that I saw, where she read the first chapter of every single book on her physical TBR. And honestly, Books and Lala, kudos to you, because I can't do that. I tried and it stressed me out so bad. I went into bad burnout. So we're going to do some of them. So let's go ahead and let's get started with that. And if I make any comments about reading all of them throughout this video, just know that initially that was my idea, but I couldn't do it. So ignore those comments if they somehow sneak in there. Let's get started. Alright, so these are all the books that are on my physical TBR. As you can see, it is a lot. I have all my hardcovers. It's not in necessarily any order, other than the fact that my hardcovers are down here. All of my paperbacks are up there. My nonfiction is up there, and these are the books that I've read. But let's just go ahead and get started with this stack right here. The first book that we have is The Maidens by Michaelides, and this is, I believe, a dark academia sort of story, if I'm not mistaken. And there might be some mystery elements to it as well. Okay, so I just finished both the prologue and chapter 1 of The Maidens by Michaelides, and I have to say this one is a lot more captivating right away, right off the bat, than The Silent Patient was. You're following our main character, and her husband has just passed away, so she's picking up his things, and you can literally feel her grief. And I just like how, just the way that it was told. And then at the very end of the first chapter, it leaves off with a cliffhanger that obviously makes you want to keep reading and figure out what happens after the death of her husband, how her husband died. Because we just don't, sorry, that was my alarm. Because we just don't know. So this one was actually really good, and I think it does make me want to keep on reading, so I'm gonna have to give this one a 10 out of 10, to be honest with you. The next one is Heart-Shaped Box by Joe Hill, and this one is a horror book. Alright, so I have finished chapter 1 of Heart-Shaped Box, which is a total of, I believe, 9-ish pages? 8 pages. And honestly, this one was really good. So in this one we are following who I believe is going to be our main character. His name is Judas, and he is a part of a very famous band, and he likes to collect morbid and haunted items. He likes the morbid stuff. He has paintings from John Wayne Gacy. He has all kinds of stuff that his fans actually send him. And one day his personal assistant tells him hey, there is this ghost that's on sale online. Do you want to buy it? And he's like, what do you mean there's a ghost on sale? And then he goes to the website and you see a description of this man who's trying to sell his stepfather who just passed away, and he believes that his stepfather's spirit is attached to this suit that they were supposed to bury him in, but they didn't. And he's basically just been haunting the family, and his 11-year-old daughter is like terrified of the spirit, and she says that she feels very uncomfortable, and the man's like tells his daughter like, oh, it's just your grandpa, he's just coming here to visit you. And his daughter's like, but you don't understand, grandpa has squiggles for eyes, like he has no eyes, I can't see him, like I can't see his eyes, he doesn't see with them anymore. And so that's when our main character Judas, who I automatically in my head I'm like, Judas band, Judas Priest, you know, like he's like, you know what, this sounds awesome, this might be good publicity, buy it. And so he decides to buy it, and we shall see what happens from there. Right away, it's very captivating. Right away, like, I'm like, ooh, like, I like how this guy thinks, Judas, because I think the same way. Like, anytime you put haunted on an item, and I'm like, okay, cool, this is awesome. Because I do like to collect things like that as well, so I understand Judas. And I'm pretty sure he gets the suit and things ensue. I heard that this one's really, really scary, and it was really good. It was really good, like the way that it was written. Like, I literally want to keep reading this, so I'm going to, this is like 100 out of 10. This is definitely a 10 out of 10. This was great. This was great. Like, I have to read this soon because it's just, it already, just the way that they described this ghost with like the no eyes, and it already sounds really creepy, and I feel like this is a book that genuinely has the potential to scare me, and I want that. So we shall see. So 10 out of 10. The next one is Happiness Falls by Angie Kim. I feel like you keep finding me in different places in my room, but you know what, it's fine. So I read chapter 1 of Happiness Falls. It is a total of 13 pages, and in this one we follow our main character, whose name I believe isn't revealed yet, but we follow her and her family. She has a brother who is on the autism spectrum and cannot speak, and basically every single day her brother and her father go for a walk in the morning, and soon the brother comes back alone and the father's nowhere to be seen. And our main character hugs her brother because she's like, oh my gosh, you're walking on your own, dad's not here, like I'm so proud of you. And she goes to hug him, and he kind of like pushes her and runs inside, and obviously he can't speak. And then it turns out that her father is missing, and she is beating herself up about this. She feels like she could have done something different, could have prevented whatever happens next, which we don't know. And that's basically where it leaves off. Nothing really interesting, or nothing really stood out to me in this. Nothing really made me be like, oh, I need to keep reading. Nothing really kept me engaged. It was okay, you know, it wasn't horrible, but at the same time it wasn't something that really gripped me in a way that made me want to continue on with the story. So if I had to rate the first chapter alone, this is going to be my first low rating. I'm probably going to give it a 4 out of 10 just because I have no motivation to keep going. Next we have The Shadows by Alex North, and if I'm not mistaken, I think this is like a thriller / horror book. This one has been on my TBR for like years, so very, very happy to finally be picking this one up, at least the first chapter, to see if it is indeed worth continuing. Okay, so I finished the prologue and chapter 1 of The Shadows. It was a total of 13 pages. Again, that seems to be like the lucky number of the day today, I guess. And in this one we are following the point of view of the boy who apparently his friend passed away when he was 15. He was brutally murdered, and he is like the main suspect. And then in chapter 1 we switch point of views to
a detective named Amanda, and she basically goes to the crime scene and she sees this boy's body, and he's posed like in sort of like a praying pose, and he is covered in stab wounds. In a rock nearby there are hundreds of like handprints, and so it seems almost like occult like. Obviously she just doesn't know what's going on and they're investigating. Honestly, I was over here like sort of like dozing off. I happen to be on at my time of the month right now, and I don't know if that's why I'm dozing off, but I'm starting to get like really tired. And I don't know, but this one I'm going to have to give it like a 3 out of 10. It wasn't that captivating to me at all, and I found myself dozing off. So, 3 out of 10. Next we have Mr. Magic by Kiersten White. This one, it was one of my most anticipated reads of 2023, and I still have yet to pick it up because I have heard very mixed reviews. So I guess depending on the first chapter, I will finally decide whether I want to actually commit to it and read the whole thing, or if I'm going to just give it away and unhaul it. Alright, so I just read chapter 1 of Mr. Magic by Kiersten White, and we are following a character named Val, and she's basically working at a summer camp. She loves to work with children. However, when it comes to her adult relationships, she doesn't like anybody to get too close to her. So she is at the summer camp, and she believes in children asking questions and always getting the answers, probably because when she was a childhood star in the show called Mr. Magic, she never got questions answered. And so every single kid gets to ask a question and she answers them openly and honestly. And then she goes to see this little girl named Poppy who's playing with a goat, and her mom gets mad because she wants Poppy to learn how to ride horses, but Val is very good with situations like that, and she's able to maneuver the conversation and make sure that the mom doesn't get angry and ends up having a very, very positive conversation with this mother. So she's able to really maneuver the anger of the mother and make it, and basically turn it into a positive conversation. And then we follow this like email about this little girl named Jenny that was from the show Mr. Magic, who wants to get a reunion together of all the characters from this show. And basically Mr. Magic was this childhood show that something happened one day and they pulled it from everywhere that could possibly exist. You can't find it on the internet, you can't find any clips of it. It's as if it never existed, but yet there's so many conspiracy theories as to what happened, and everybody has heard of it. They know that they've watched it, but yet if you Google, there's no evidence it ever existed. So the first chapter was pretty good. I loved the author's writing. I don't understand so far as to why people don't enjoy this. This was pretty entertaining. I don't understand why it's so controversial, because I actually liked this first chapter a lot. So I think I'll give it a 7 out of 10. It did pretty well. Yeah, it was pretty good. It was pretty good. I think it was pretty captivating. Let's do 8 out of 10. Well, we're gonna do an 8 out of 10. This was pretty good. Next we have Build Your House Around My Body by Violet Kupersmith. This is another one that I believe is a horror as well. Okay, so I am back with Build Your House Around My Body, and in this one we are following a Vietnamese woman named Winnie, I believe, in the first chapter, and she is checking into this motel. She has just arrived somewhere, and the security guard doesn't know whether to speak to her in Vietnamese or in English, so she ends up checking into this cheap motel. Then she plans to go to her grandmother's house the next morning around 6 a.m. and that's basically all that happens in the first chapter. However, even though nothing much happened and I don't even know what this story involves, all I know is that I believe it's some sort of horror, and I could be wrong about that too, to be honest. The writing style did captivate me. It's still, even though, like I said, nothing happened, some writers some authors just have a way with words that, even though they are saying the most simple, simplistic things, they say it in a way that's just very entertaining and that keeps the reader interested. And I found myself very interested while reading pretty much not much going on. And I liked it. So for this one, I'm going to give it a, I'll give it a 8 out of 10. Next we have The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. This is a very famous thriller book about, I believe it's a wife who is just seen as normal. You know, there's nothing wrong with her until one day she comes home and she unalives her husband and she never says a word again. And we are following what exactly happens. I heard it's intense, it has you at the edge of your seat, and then it's a good one. So I'm excited because I am back into my thriller era. Alright, so we're back with we finished chapter 1 of The Silent Patient. And in the first chapter, it was actually a prologue and a first chapter that I got through, and in the prologue we basically follow the wife as she gets this journal that her husband gifted to her, and she decides that she wants to call it a diary and not a journal because she doesn't want it to feel like a chore. And then in the first chapter we follow another perspective, and it is after the wife has already done the deed. She's unalived the husband, and it sort of just goes into what happens. So basically she paints and it's a normal day and she's like this painter and her husband's like this like photographer, and it just seems like a normal day, nothing out of the ordinary. They both seemed like very normal people, and he comes home and he is shot in the face by his wife. And when the police arrive there, she just doesn't say anything at all. She just doesn't talk. And she gets checked into a mental asylum, I believe. And she just never says a word again. And the only thing that they know that sort of either means that she's guilty or not guilty is the fact that she started painting again. She makes this one painting, but they didn't really go into detail about what the painting is. And it just seems like she's saying everything through her artwork. And so it was interesting. It wasn't like, oh my goodness, I have to keep flipping through the next page. It seems like a very like slow burn sort of thriller. So I'm going to give the first chapter a 6 out of 10. This spells Love by Robb. And this one, I believe, is a romance. I don't really read contemporary romance too much, but this does have some fantasy elements or magical realism, I guess. And so because of that, I'm a little bit intrigued because I've never really read like contemporary romance that has a little bit of magical elements. I might like it, so we shall see. Alright, so I finished chapter 1 of This Spells Love by Robb, and this was really fun. So we are following our main character, and she has just been broken up with. She's gone weeks, like 3 disgusting weeks, I believe, without showering, and now she's finally getting up, getting dressed, and she decides to go to the donut shop with her sister. But instead of getting donuts, she has a whole thing with apple fritters, so she gets a fritter instead. And then her best friend, who happens to be this like really hot, handsome guy, ends up texting her like, hey, we're gonna hang out tonight. And her sister's like teasing her like, why don't you just mess around with him? Get over your breakup. And then she's like, because he's my friend. We've been friends for so long, I'm assuming, and you don't do that with friends. And so her sister's like, come on, like, just get with him, he seems like such a nice person, he does all these things for you. And she's just like, no, I'm not going to do that. He's my friend. And so then her aunt calls her and tells her like, hey, I'm having this thing tonight, bring your sister and bring your friend with you if you want to. And then her sister just makes this joke and like takes off, but says that she's gonna meet her, and I'm assuming they're all gonna go to their aunt's thing, whatever she has going on. And it just seems fun. Like this one also, like I said that I don't like contemporary romance and I don't like romance anymore as much as I used to, but I think from all the heaviness that I've been reading, it's nice to have a little bit of a break, and I feel like that's what we're getting with this. So this seems kind of fun. I'm intrigued by this one. So I'm going to give this one a 8 out of 10. No, you know what? Let's do 9 out of 10. Next we have His and Hers by Alice Feeney. I have read one other book by Alice Feeney called Sometimes I Lie. I believe it was called Sometimes I Lie, something like that. And even though I don't remember the title, I do remember really enjoying the book a lot. And it's the book that got me into thrillers and that made me realize that this genre is just amazing. And so I can't wait to read another one by her. So I read chapter 1. I believe it's chapter 1. It's like his chapter, and then we read her chapter. And we basically follow two POVs. We follow his POV, but we don't really get who he is. He does something horrible, and he hears little voices in his head that tells him to unalive people. And then we follow her perspective, who I'm assuming is going to be his victim, or I don't know what sort of. I'm assuming it's going to be his victim. And she basically works for the news? Yeah, she's a news anchor, and we just follow her on her day-to-day life as she works as a news anchor, and her perspective isn't really captivating, but Alice Feeney has this way of writing that's still so good even if nothing's happening. Like, I've read one other book by Alice Feeney called Sometimes I Lie, and it was like my favorite thriller of all time. It was the thriller that got me into thrillers, and it's literally my favorite thriller ever. So I know that this is going to be really good. But the first chapter, the first two that I read, I'm probably going to have to rate it a, like, I'll say 7 out of 10. Because I know that this is going to be great, but it wasn't as captivating as I wanted it to be. Next we have The Last Time I Lied by Riley Sager, and I have a love-hate relationship with Riley Sager. I do enjoy, there is a book that I really do enjoy that was like one of my favorites of like 2022, and then he has a book that I DNF'd because I just could not stand it. So we shall see where this one lands, and this one I believe is a thriller as well. Alright, so I read the first chapter of The Last Time I Lied by Riley Sager, and this one we are following I don't know if she's like a camp counselor, but she's basically looking for these like little girls that are supposed to be laying down in their bed at camp, but when she goes into their cabin, she realizes that none of them are in the cabin, and she starts to look around for them. She's like, oh, maybe they're here, maybe they're there, and she does not find them anywhere until finally she runs to the lake, and she starts thinking the worst. She's like, they either ran into the woods and we can't find them, or they are drowning under the lake, and she starts screaming, panicking because she doesn't know what to do. And that is what I read, and that was great. 9 out of 10. 9 out of 10. That was fantastic. Next is My Darling Girl by Jennifer McMahon, and this is I believe like a thriller or horror or psychological horror, something like that. I heard that Jennifer McMahon just writes a lot of horror novels and they're all very good, so I'm excited to pick this one up. I just never have. I got it, I believe, last year, sometime in 2023, and I still have yet to read it. I have finished chapter 1 of My Darling Girl by Jennifer McMahon. And this is the first book out of all of them that I feel like I just did not want to stop. This was so good. The first chapter was so messed up in the most amazing, astonishing way. It was so good. So I read the 27 years ago part. I didn't exactly start with like chapter 1 just because we don't got time for that. We have so many books to read that we don't have time to read all that. Okay, it's just, that's not gonna happen. It's just not gonna happen. So I read the first few pages, so the prologue basically, not to chapter 1, and it's so good. So we basically follow who I'm assuming is going to be our main character when she's a little girl, and her mom walks in while she's laying down, and she tells her daughter, oh, I love you, and her daughter tells you, I love you back. And then she gets close to her daughter and she whispers in her ear, like, I wish I had unalived you when you were little. Then I could have prevented you from a whole life of pain. Like, excuse me? And then this little girl, not knowing what to think, she starts thinking about what it would be like to just be a corpse laying there. And it's just, yeah. And she was like, how would I be if my mom did unalive me when I was little? How would she react? How would she be? and then her mom starts poking her with something really sharp and like drawing circles on her with something sharp, which I'm assuming is a knife or something. And then she starts screaming and she's like, Mom, stop. Mom, no. And it's like, what? And then her mom shifts and morphs into something else. It's not her mom. And I'm like, what did I just read? 100 out of 10. Like, this was so messed up and dark, and it reminded me of like Verity by Colleen Hoover, and I was one of those people that loved that book. So good. So good. So good. 10 out of 10 for sure. Next we have Hello Stranger by Katherine Center. This is another romance book, and this one we follow our main character, who I believe it becomes a blind, but there's some sort of like love triangle that happens when she's blind. She has to choose which guy she is going to decide to be with, and that's all I know about it. I think it's supposed to be comedy and humorous and romancy. So, but like I said, it's been a while since I picked up a romance, and I just find that I don't like romance anymore, so we shall see what I think of this one. So I read chapter 1 of Hello Stranger by Katherine Center, and in this one we are following our main character, who basically has just been nominated to be a part of like this huge like art thing competition that's happening, and it's basically thousands and thousands of people competing, and they brought it down to like 20. So out of thousands and thousands, she made it to the top 20. So the number one winner is going to win $10,000 cash, and she is so excited for it. And the first person that she calls is her father, which she doesn't know why she calls her father. She thinks she knows why, because her father basically was the one that was like paying for her tuition and paying for everything for her, until she told him that she's like, hey, you know what, I don't want to pursue the medical career that you want me to pursue. I want to pursue art. And her mother, because her mother pursued art, and her dad's like, oh, there's no money in that, like, why do you want to do that? And she's like, because I want to do what I love. And then he's like, all right, so if you want to do that and you don't want to do what I tell you, then I'm not going to support you. And so she's basically broke, but she doesn't want to tell her dad that she's broke. So she finally has something worthwhile to tell her father. So that's why she's so excited to tell her father. But her dad doesn't pick up the phone. So she calls her best friend, and her best friend's like, oh, we're going to throw a party. This is such an honor. This is so amazing. I'm so proud of you. Let's throw a party. And so she goes to the store to buy a very cheap bottle of wine, because she's a broke artist, and some dog treats for her dog. And she realizes that she forgets her wallet. But then the man behind her, who has what she explains to be a generic but handsome face, and she says that attractive people typically have generic faces because we like to see what we're familiar with or whatever. So, which is very interesting, a very interesting way of like explaining attractiveness, but I don't disagree with it. You know what I mean? Like, it's true. It's true. It's true. So there's that. So she says that, and he ends up getting the glass of wine for her, even though she says not to. And so he brings it to her car, and he also brings her a bouquet of flowers, and she turns around, she says thank you, and she turns around and starts heading back to her car, and then she doesn't remember anything, like she blacks out. So I think, and then starting the next chapter, it looks like she wakes up in the hospital, so something happens to her. So this one was pretty good. You know what? I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10 because this was really fun. This was very different. I feel like every other book that I've read so far pretty much has a very dark tone to it, but this one had a very like light, fun, whimsical, not whimsical, but like a very light, fun tone. So I definitely liked the shift in story. The shift in the plot, the shift in the feeling, overall feeling of the book. So I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10 because I really did enjoy that shift from all these darker books to something like this. Last but certainly not least on this third stack is Ready Player One by Ernest Cline, and this is a sci-fi about this future where everybody wears this like VR headset, and I really loved the movie, so I really wanted to read the book, and I'm excited to pick this one up as well. Read chapter 1 of Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. And in this one we are following the creator of this like really huge video game series. and he makes like a whole bunch of VR games, and this is in the future, and he has just passed away, and his fortune is worth like billions and billions of dollars, and basically he leaves hints for anybody to obtain his fortune because he has no heir. But years and years pass and nobody finds the fortune. And so then at the end of the first chapter, it's like, I think it's a prologue because it's like chapter 0 or something like that. But I'm considering that the first chapter. He's like, oh, but nobody found it until me, and this is my story. Basically like that, you know, something like that. It was okay. I loved the movie. I love this movie so much. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. So I know that I'm going to enjoy this book. And so far it's following the movie very closely. I'm pretty sure we're going to get a lot more details in the book than we do in the movie. It wasn't as captivating, but I know the further we get into the story, the more and more captivating it's going to be. Next we have The Last Love Note by Emma Gray, and I believe this is a romance, and also kind of a story where this woman sort of finds herself as well. Alright, so just finished the prologue and chapter 1 of The Last Love Note by Emma Gray. And it was 25 pages long in total. Okay, the prologue was super long. The chapter 1 was super long. This is the same day as my earlier videos, by the way. I just put on a sweater because I'm cold. But in this story, we follow our main character as her husband passes away and she's dealing with her grief. And you just see how hurt and how much she just breaks down with her 3-year-olds. She just breaks down in the middle of the supermarket while she has her 3-year-old son. And then we fast forward to 2 years later and she's still grieving her deceased husband. And she is basically looking out the window with her best friend over this new neighbor that is very attractive. But our main character still can't find herself being attracted to other men just because she's still grieving over her husband. But the neighbor ends up catching her looking at him, and so he comes over and says hello, and that's when her son walks in with a old grenade that was owned by her husband's in his hand. And at first she thinks it's just a replica, but then her friend posts a picture and a weapons expert, supposedly, that her friend is friends with, is like, oh, this is an actual grenade, like you need to call the police right now. And so she does call the police, and the police are like, ma'am, are you sure? And so they send a weapons expert, and all this is happening while their new neighbor is like right there staring at them. It was good. I mean, it was pretty entertaining. I just think it was really long. I mean, not much happened. It was okay. It was good. Not great, but good. So I think I'm gonna I'll give it a 6. I'll give it a 6 out of 10. Next we have The Manningtree Witches by A.K. Blakemore. This is one that I have had on my shelf for years, and I have not heard anything about this book. I just literally bought it because I thought the cover was gorgeous, and I just never picked it up again. I have heard no reviews on this, so I don't know if this is a good one, if this is a terrible one, but I guess we will see. And again, this might be another one that, depending on the first chapter, I decide whether I might just unhaul it or actually stick to it and read it all the way through. Alright, so I read chapter 1 of The Manningtree Witches by A.K. Blakemore, and this is the book that I bought literally just a blind buy that I just like the cover of. The first chapter is a total of 9 pages. And it follows our main character, and it's talking about the times in the 1600s where there was like witch trials and witches and all this stuff. And then we follow our main character who is inside her home with her mother, and her mother is very not pretty, very unattractive. And apparently everybody who her mother ends up coming across with in a negative way, they end up unalive, and so she's starting to suspect that maybe something's wrong with her mom. I didn't like the writing. I don't know, the writing's just not for me. Maybe it's like the time period too. I don't know what it is, but it's just like, it's just not calling my attention, like, at all. Like, I have no interest, zero interest whatsoever to continue this. So I'm going to give it a 2 out of 10, and I think I'm just going to go ahead and unhaul this one because I didn't enjoy it at all. Something should have drawn me in, and nothing did. In 9 pages, nothing happened. And usually, I don't know, usually the first chapter is supposed to be what, like, draws in a reader or, like, holds them in some way, and I got none of that. I'm like, okay, if it starts out that way, I don't even want to continue. We have Pan's Labyrinth by Guillermo del Toro and Cornelia Funk, or The Labyrinth and the Fawn. This is one of my favorite movies of all time. I absolutely love this movie. I love the dark elements to it, how they mix this dark period in history in combination with all these like dark fantasy creatures, and I just thought it was so well done. And even though I watched this when I was younger, I watched it when I was like 12 or 13, I was just so mesmerized by how beautiful this tale was. Yeah, and it's been one that's been on my shelf for years and years. Hello you guys, it is another day and we are now reading Pan's Labyrinth, or as I knew growing up, El Laberinto del Fauno, and this was good. The first chapter was 6 pages long and it is just as good as I remembered. I loved this movie as a kid, and I know I shouldn't have been watching it as a kid, but it was still something that I never saw anything like it, and I've always been a really creepy kid. So I liked the darker fairy tales. I really loved that. I thought it was beautiful. And I was obsessed with this movie. So I'm really happy to be reading this, even if it's just the first chapter, because it made me remember everything that I loved about this book. And in this one we are following our main character, Ophelia. And Ophelia is going to a brand new place to live because her father has just passed away and her mother remarried, and now she's pregnant with this man's child who is like the commanding officer or the general or something for this army, but he's a terrible man. Okay, he's a terrible man. Ophelia does not like him, and the only reason why the mother agreed to remarry is because she believes that this is a man's world and they need men to protect them. But Ophelia, even though she's a little older, I believe she's around 12 if I'm not mistaken, she still believes in fairy tales. And when the car gets pulled over and her mother can like throw up because, you know, obviously she's pregnant, Ophelia sees this long thing that sort of looks like a big grasshopper or a big cricket, but she's like, oh my gosh, this is a fairy. And she tells her mom like, hey, I saw a fairy. And of course her mother's like, okay, you're way too old to believe in fairy tales. But Ophelia swears she saw a fairy. And that's where we leave off in the first chapter, and this is just a beautiful, like, just such an enchanting tale. And I mean, look at this cover, even without the sleeve on, is just absolutely gorgeous. Like, look at that. The artwork is just stunning, and this is literally the Fauno from the movie, and this is Ophelia from the movie as well. I wish they had like I wish they had dubbed it in English, that way like my kids could watch it. Even though it's rated R, yes, I would still let my kids watch this because this is good, and I have creepy kids too, okay? Just like I was a creepy child, and they're older, okay? But yeah, so this is great. So I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. The Whisperman by Alex North, and I believe this is a thriller, and I believe the other one that he wrote is a horror if I'm not mistaken. But I'm very interested because all his covers are just interesting and like fascinating and cool looking to me. Alright, so I read chapter 1 of The Whisperman by Alex North. I believe I already read one of Alex North books, or the first chapter of the book, and I think that one was like a horror book, and I think I rated it like 4 out of 10 stars or like 5 out of 10 stars. It wasn't good. It wasn't a good rating. But this one, however, started great. We are following some letter that I believe it's his father writing it to his son, And he was talking about the day that his son came home, his son Jake, and he just did not know what to do with the baby. He's like, I can't believe the hospital let you come home with me because you were so fragile. I didn't know what to do. Your mom was such a natural, but I was not. And even as you grew older, I still didn't know what to do with you. And your mom said it was because we were so alike, and I hope that that's not true because I want a better life for you. And then he admits he had a lot of secrets, and he admits that he's like, you know, I told you the monsters weren't real, and they are. And that's how the letter ends. And then in the first chapter, that's like the prologue, and in the first chapter we follow this little boy who's about 6 years old, and his name is Neil, and he is walking home from school, and he has really bad parents. He has parents that are alcoholic. They don't take care of their son. Like, they just literally let him walk home alone at the age of like 6 or 7 years old. And obviously a man starts following him, and I guess because Neil, the little boy, has had a lot, you know, he's been neglected, his parents don't take care of him, he ends up seeking attention by bullying other kids and hitting other kids. And this man, he keeps track of the kids that bully other kids because he knows that when they are adults, they're going to turn out to be very violent adults. So he ends up whispering their names, hence the Whisper Man, and I think he's going to like kidnap him. I don't know what he does with the kids, where he puts them, if he murders them, if he keeps them alive, I have no idea. But that's where chapter 1 ends. And another 10 out of 10 because this was good too. This was so good. Well done. Well done. I really liked it. And next we have one that I have been meaning to read because everybody talks about this author and how amazing his work is. And that is Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby. And I'm excited for this one. Alright, so I finished chapter 1 of Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby, and in this one we are following a father as he is opening up the door, his front door, and then he sees 2 police officers, and he's had a bad run-in with the police in the past, so he's like, oh my gosh, what now? And then he sees the police officer's demeanor, and he realizes that it's not aggressive in any way. The police officer actually looks really sad when he's talking to this man, and he's like, hey, do you have a son named Isaiah, I believe? And he's like, yes, I do have a son named Isaiah. And as soon as the police officer says that, he immediately knows that something happened to his son. And that's the day that his life changed forever. Like, that's how the chapter ends. And this gets me. This gets me. This is written so well, even though it was just like 3 pages. It was so good. So I'm going to give this one a 10 out of 10 just because the way that S.A. Cosby writes just really deeply moves me and makes me feel things. Like, I don't know how to explain it. He's just has such a way of writing, even with those just very brief few pages, still impacted me so much that I could feel every single emotion that this father was feeling. So I'm going to give this one a 10 out of 10. Next, we're going to read this stack here. One of them is a sequel, so I'm not counting that one, but let's start from this one. This is A Day of Fallen Light by Samantha Shannon. This is a high fantasy about this time in history, obviously his fictional history, where dragons roam the land or something like that. This is a prequel to The Priory of the Orange Tree, but I heard that you could read it either or, it doesn't really matter. So I picked this one up and decided to read this one first before The Priory of the Orange Tree. However, this is a chunker. So I am very intimidated by the size. So we shall see. I read, technically it's sort of half of the prologue, but it was 9 pages. And if I were to read, there's like multiple parts in the prologue and then chapter 1. So if I were to read all of that, it would be well over 30 pages. And I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I read the first part of the prologue, which is a total of 9 pages. So I think that's decent enough. Okay, that's decent enough. In this one, we are following this woman named I don't even know how to pronounce her name, to be honest. Honora? So Honora is from this town or something where she has to like work in like farming, and they haven't had rain or anything, and there's just been drought after drought after drought, and people are dropping like flies because of this drought. There's no water. They're absolutely parched until everyone but Honora is literally like the only one alive that's a part of like the workers. And so she ends up summoning this dragon god. This like white dragon god that makes oceans and storms. And when she wakes him up, he's like, I'm not yet ready to come out, and my time hasn't come yet. Why have you woken me early? And she's like, my people are dying. Please, can you please like give me water? And the dragon is like, no, I'm not going to give you water. My time hasn't come yet. She's like, can I at least please speak to the emperor? And then he's like, no, I can't do that. So she's like, please, I need water. We need water. And so he gives her a tear, and he's like, this will last you a whole season or something like that. But in return, you have to give me something too. But he never tells her what he needs. And she ends up drinking that tear, and she's like automatically like quenched, and she's not thirsty anymore. And then she is found the next day by some servants of the emperor, and she gets into the emperor's palace, and she becomes really close to like the servants. They treat her almost like a princess. And then she ends up meeting this mysterious man in the middle of the night, and she's desperate obviously to meet the emperor, but she never does. And then this mysterious man starts visiting her in the middle of the night, and then he ends up getting her pregnant. After a while, she is having like all these symptoms of like pregnancy, and the servant realizes that she's pregnant and gives her a soup to terminate the pregnancy. And that's when she realizes like, oh, this mysterious man was the emperor, and so I'm going to keep this kid, and I'm going to pretend I drink this soup, but I'm not going to, because this kid is the only thing that's going to keep me talking to this emperor. So she decides to keep the child, and that's how it ends. And the writing is very beautiful. I really like the way that it's written, even though it's very slow paced. I have like this thing about pacing where if things are very slow paced, there has to be something that continues to drive me forward. For this, it's the writing. It's gonna be the plot building or the world building, the characters, and for this, it's just the way that it's written that keeps me wanting to flip page after page. So for this, I'm going to actually give it a 8 out of 10.
Next we have Silver Nitrate by Silvia Moreno Garcia, because I picked this one up because even though I have read one book by Silvia Moreno Garcia and I did not enjoy it too much, I really want to read Hispanic and Latino authors, and I really wanted to give this one a try, especially since it is a horror film historical fiction sort of based tale. And this one is again another one that I heard very mixed reviews on it, so we shall see the first chapter whether this is something that I will indeed be reading in the future, or if I'm just going to decide to maybe unhaul it. I'm gonna try not to, because I really want to read this. I really want to read more from Hispanic authors, so we will see. Okay. Alright, so I finished chapter 1 of Silver Nitrate. It is a total of 16 pages, which is a little bit more average, I guess, by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This is a author that I previously have read from that I unfortunately didn't like. I read her book, I think it's called like Gods of Jade and Shadow. It was like a 3 out of 5 star for me, but honestly it's been a few years and I still remember a lot of that book, and it's been years, like so long, at least like 6-7 years since I read that. So it's been a while. I don't know how long that book has come out, but since it was like newly released, I read it. And in this one we are following Montserrat, and Montserrat is a sound editor for this TV production company, and she's 38, and as she gets older, it seems like the
whole company just sort of wants to give her less and less and less roles, and so she goes from working like 5 days a week to 4 days a week, and now she's only working like 3, and sometimes she even goes like a whole week without even getting any jobs that she needs to do. And she's like, oh, like, it's because I'm getting older. And she really believes this because she also has a friend named Tristan that she grew up with, and he was like a model, and then he got this big gig when it comes to Televisa, which I believe in my head it's like Televisión, you know, like the whole Hispanic channel. So he gets a role and he becomes like this famous actor, but they still maintain their friendship even though our main character, Montserrat, really fell in love with him, and she's like always kind of been in love with him. And they go to this restaurant and he asks her if he could borrow her car, and she feels like he's always trying to like feed off of her or whatever, and every time like he's single, it seems like she wants something for him, but as soon as he gets in a relationship, he just like separates himself from her completely and completely forgets about her. But as soon as he's single, he like needs her again. He like crawls back to her, and like Montserrat is like, absolutely not, like, I'm done, you're a terrible person, even though she still loves him. You know, she still has so much love for him, but at the same time she doesn't want to give him that power anymore. And so after that, she ends up going back to her job, and she is so rude to her boss, and she's like, you are cutting my hours. And then he's like, it's because you have a bad attitude, you don't get along with anyone, everybody complains about you. And she's like, who complains about me? He's like, well, this person for one. And like, this is what I mean, you have a bad attitude, so take the whole week off. And she feels like he was just trying to bait her, and she is just like done. Like, she needs to find another job because this income isn't doing it for her anymore. And it looks like she needs to pay some bills for her sister, I believe, named Araceli. I don't know what's wrong with Araceli, but there's something that she needs to cover the bills for. So she's probably gonna look for a new job now. That's how it started. It was pretty good, honestly. I didn't mind the first chapter. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, I need to keep reading, but it was engaging enough for me to be curious to continue, if that makes any sense. I am curious to continue. I am curious to what happens next. However, these characters are quite irritating. Montserrat, I don't really mind too much. This is the 90s, and this is a woman working in a production company in the 90s, so I can see where the sexism plays in that. Also, but the characters are kind of like, Montserrat I don't mind, but the other characters, like Tristan, is absolutely annoying. I couldn't stand him. Like, he's such a snobby character, and I know that he becomes one of the main characters, so we'll see. So I think I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't like the greatest. Yeah, I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10. So it's pretty interesting first chapter. So that's Silver Nitrate by Silvia Moreno Garcia. Next we have The Vanishing Half by Brit Bennett, author of The Mothers, and this is also a Good Morning America book club. I have heard nothing but good things about this. However, this is a little outside of my comfort zone, so we shall see how I feel about it. Alright, so I just finished The Vanishing Half chapter 1. And it was 31 pages. Why does a chapter have to be 31 pages long? Ugh. I don't know if you guys are like this, but I hate when authors write long chapters. I do appreciate that she put like breaks in between. So if you did want to put the book down, you're able to. For example, like right here, there's a space, there's a gap, but still. Did a chapter really have to be 31 pages long? Why? This story basically follows two twins. They are black, but they are very light-skinned, and they live in this town where like light skin is like a good thing. But all in all, they're still black. So I believe one of the twins is like, you know, her father was taken away because even though he's super light-skinned, he is still a black guy, and this is like in the 1950s when racism's still prominent, you know, but it was even more prominent than it is now. Basically, these two twins grow up with their mother, and they're always seen as like, oh, you're light-skinned and this and that. And one of the twins, Desiree, has always wanted to leave her town, but her other twin sister, Stella, has always wanted to stay there. She was really interested in her math work and studying. And eventually when they turn 16, the mom's like, hey, I need to pull you guys out of school. Like, I need help with the income. So the girls start working, and they start cleaning for these like rich white people. And Desiree's like, okay, I can't take this anymore. I don't want to keep continuing to clean these these white people's houses anymore. Like, I need to get out of here. So she leaves. And eventually, as she gets older, she finds a relationship with a black man that is dark-skinned, and she ends up having a baby with him. However, this man is terrible. He abuses her physically, and she ends up having a baby with him, and her friends can't help but be like, okay, are you having a baby with this guy even though you know he's terrible just because he's dark-skinned and you want to spite your mother and you want to be rebellious? Desiree just doesn't know. But she does, of course, love her daughter, and she ends up, after she has her daughter, she decides that she doesn't want to be with that man, like, she wants to separate herself from them, but she has nowhere else to go, so she ends up going back to her mother in that town. The first thing her mother says is like, this baby doesn't look like you. Like, why is this baby doesn't look like you, or are you trying to spite us just because the baby is like darker skin than her? And then we follow this other character that grew up with Desiree, and I think he's some sort of PI or something, but he gets told if he wants to take the case to find Desiree because the husband is looking for her and he really wants his child. We don't know if he's going to take that case, but that's where we leave off in those 31 pages. And I don't know, have you ever read something that you don't like it, and you just can't pinpoint exactly why you didn't like it? That's how I feel about this. I don't know if it was the fact that it was 31 pages and that irked me to the core. Like, why do I have to read 31 pages in chapter 1? I don't know what it was. I literally cannot pinpoint what it was that like just kind of withdrew me from the story. But even though the concept is very interesting, I couldn't get into it. And maybe it was the whole 31 pages is way too long. Maybe it's the fact that I don't typically enjoy historical fiction. I don't know what it is. I can't pinpoint exactly what it is, but this was not for me. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to give this a 2 out of 10, and I'm probably going to unhaul this. The next one is The Inheritance of Orquidea Divina. And this one, I believe, by Zoraida Cordova, and I believe this is another Hispanic/Latin author, so I'm really interested in reading this one as well. I can't remember if this is a fantasy or a horror book, but I know that this is a very beloved book because I do remember hearing nothing but positive reviews about this one. So I'm excited to finally at least read the first chapter of this one as well. Alright, so I finished chapter 1 of The Inheritance of Orquidea Divina, and this was good. It's about 16 pages, I think, the first chapter, and we follow Orquidea's invitation to her family members, her descendants, to come collect their inheritance. Then we go back in time to when Orquidea Divina was younger, and she basically stumbled upon this house like in this town, and nobody knew where she came from. Literally, she came out of nowhere, and this house came out of nowhere, and everybody starts to think that she's a witch because they start to think that there's something up with this house. This house is kind of enchanted, and it gives me like Encanto vibes. Like, I'm not gonna lie, this gives me Encanto vibes, but the writing style is very whimsical and it's pretty. I don't know how else to describe it. I like how we start at the end and then go right back to the beginning. And I don't know, there's just something about this that I'm really enjoying. I like the whimsical feel. So far, it's giving like cozy fantasy vibes. I don't know if it gets intense, but I love how the end of the first chapter finishes off with the whole, like, the past is going to catch up to her, and then that's why she decides to give her descendants her inheritance, because she knows that she's about to pass away. She knows that her past caught up to her. She knows that the universe is taking back what she wanted or what she got from when she was younger, and now the universe is like, hey, pay up now. And I'm assuming paying up is her life. I don't know how she got into this problem. I don't know what sort of magic or witchcraft or whatever the F may be that she gets. But there seems to be something whimsical with this house. There seems to be something very whimsical with this woman. And I like it. I like it. So I think I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. It was really good. The Collective by Allison Galen. No killer goes unpunished. I don't know if that's just a tagline or if that's a part of the actual title, but I believe this is like a thriller about these like moms that like want revenge or something like that. Something like that. I could be completely wrong, but I do believe it is a thriller that has to do with motherhood or moms. And it seems because of that, I like books about motherhood, I find. So I think this is going to be an interesting one as well. Alright, so finished chapter 1 of The Collective by Allison Galen. This first chapter is about 13 pages long, and in this one we follow a grieving mother as her daughter has passed away, and she got really close to this really privileged young man, and then her daughter ends up being unalived, and her mother suspects that it's this young man, but he gets away scot-free. And so she shows up at this ceremony that's happening for this young man, and she starts screaming murder, and then she's tackled by a rent-a-cop and then arrested. And she talks a little bit about what happened after her daughter passed away, how hard the grieving has been after losing a child, which of course any mother can't even imagine how much that hurts, how painful that is. For some reason though, I don't know what it was, this one didn't really captivate me as much. It didn't really draw me in. Like, I could feel the pain, but at the same time there wasn't too much that got me excited to keep reading. I don't know, so I'm gonna give this one a 5 out of 10, but it wasn't like horrible, if you get what I mean. So it was okay.
Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. So that is all the books that I have for you today. Let me know if you guys enjoyed watching this as much as I enjoyed. Actually, I didn't enjoy making this. At first it was fun, and then I got over it. So let me know if you enjoyed watching this, because then I will do it again. I will struggle. I will do it for you. I will go through that heartbreak. It's not heartbreak. I will go through that pain again for you guys. So let me know if you guys want to watch more. If you guys haven't yet, please hit that subscribe button and turn on that notification bell to be notified when I post. I post once to twice a week. And yeah, if you haven't yet, also follow me on my Booktok/TikTok. Link is down below, as well as my Amazon wishlist. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!